S&S declarations, consignors and consignees. And we're back. Imports and exports general enquiries. We'll return to this page at the end. For now, let's close these pages and start back at the UK border model PDF. So, creating this video, S&S declarations, consignors and consignees, was a bit of a last-minute decision, and hopefully, it's an added bonus for you. Hurrah! This video now precedes the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, GVMS, video, which will follow in 6 or 7 minutes or so. And this, in turn, is followed by my video on the UK HGV Smart app. So, hopefully, by now, you will have seen my video coverage of the pre-lodgement model and temporary storage model, history of common transit, CTC, as well as the other preparatory videos, Introduction to the Lisbon Treaty, UCC, and inventory-linked systems. If so, I conjure you to bring the pre-lodgement model and CTC to mind, whilst we go through some terminology. And what terminology is that? UK Safety and Security Declarations, followed by Authorised Consignors and Consignees. After that, we'll see what hauliers need to do when importing and exporting goods, to and from the UK. And next, a brief intro to S&S declarations. We're just cherry-picking a few points, so pause to read where you like. Popping down to supplementary information, and the glossary. Scroll down a bit. We see Safety and Security, or S&S, declarations. And we see two categories of S&S declarations. Entry summary declarations are used for imports. And exit summary declarations are used for exports. All S&S declarations provide data about consignments to customs authorities for risk analysis purposes and in advance of the goods arrival at customs. And note, an EOI is required in order to make any declarations at all, including S&S declarations. And I covered EOI elsewhere. But staying on track. Search for page 73, and we see S&S declarations protect the UK against potential threats, such as terrorism, and the trade from illicit goods, such as guns and drugs, while facilitating the movement of legitimate trade into or out of the UK. And that's nice. So, S&S and the pre-lodgement model. Starting with UK exit summary declarations. These are pre-departure messages sent to the UK customs offices prior to goods leaving the UK. All exports leaving the UK will require safety and security S&S declarations from the 1st of January 2021. Exit summary declarations can be standalone documents. More commonly, however, the exit summary declaration is combined with the export declaration that traders submit early to customs. Indeed, combined export declarations are lodged at customs offices even before or just as goods movements hit the road to head to customs checkpoints or to the ports of exit from the UK. The data required, for example, in the pre-departure section of the export declaration includes the consignor, consignee, a description of the goods, routing, country by country, location of goods, and customs office of departure. And from January 2021, the EU still uses CHIEF. And because the processes that control goods entering the EU are controlled by the EU, exit summary declarations are still required to be made in CHIEF. There may be other options, but essentially, this means that traders or their representatives still need a CHIEF badge. And that's nice. However, where a combined export declaration is made, the exit summary data will be shared with a new system, called S&SGB. We also see options to submit exit summary declarations, via CSPs and third-party providers. Touching on S&SGB, plus these other options again shortly, as we look at pre-arrival messages. Search for page 56 and pre-arrival entry summary declarations. The pre-arrival bit means the entry summary declaration is sent prior to the arrival of the ship or plane ferrying goods to a port or airport. But the carrier could also be a rail or road haulier, depending on the geography. So, For example, for goods being sent to the UK from the EU, by sea or air, the entry summary declaration is sent by the air or sea carrier, just as it embarks on its journey, to a UK port or airport. Indeed, whoever is acting as the active means of transport has the legal responsibility to ensure that all pre-arrival entry summary declarations relating to their manifest of boarded goods are sent to customs authorities at the UK port, where the goods will offload. And to reiterate, pre-arrival entry summary declarations are sent just as the transportation method departs from its starting point. The data required for entry summary declarations includes consignor, consignee, a description of the goods, routing, country by country, conveyance, for example, ship or flight reference, and time of arrival. And the carriers will note that for goods destined for the UK, entry summary declarations can be made using the new UK S&S system, called S&SGB. S&SGB is a new system, separate from the Chief/CDS systems normally used to process declarations. But also, we see entry summary declarations will still be accepted via community system providers, i.e., CSP systems, or via specific third-party software providers. And commonly, these are necessary for communications between ship and air carriers and port authorities. If using CSP or third-party software, one might imagine the entry summary data will also be shared with the new S&SGB system too. One can imagine that road hauliers, not equipped with CSP or third-party software, may need to apply for S&SGB in order to submit entry summary declarations when carrying goods from Calais to Folkestone via Eurotunnel, for example. And we cover safety and security declarations in a bit more detail in other videos too. Next, search for page 19. Transit. Consignor and consignee. A consignor is simply the person sending goods. A consignee is anyone receiving goods. Note that a consignor and consignee do not necessarily have to be the buyer and seller, if other bodies are authorized to fulfill these functions. We discuss simplified procedures, CTC, and NCTS, elsewhere and in future videos. But the combination of simplified procedures, CTC and NCTS makes possible a very accessible and seamless way of doing business at one's own premises. In brief, how does all this work with authorized consignors and consignees? Okay. Scrolling down a bit. With Common Transit Convention movements, an authorized consignor and authorized consignee need to have access to the NCTS or new computerized transit system in order to exchange information with the CTC Customs Office of Departure and CTC Customs Office of Destination. Jumping to page 75 and scroll down a bit to Locations. The NCTS allows authorized consignors to create the transit declaration in their own computer system and send the electronic declaration to the Customs Office of Departure, allowing the journey to commence at the given time without the goods having to be presented there. Fab. Also, jumping to page 20. Ending transit movements. The NCTS system allows authorized consignees to receive the goods and the transit accompanying document, plus any related documentation as required for a specific goods movement, but at their own premises. Consignees can then send an arrival notification to the relevant Customs Office of Destination. On top of this, any other prior, intermediate, or subsequent messaging related to a common transit movement can also be done via the NCTS system. How's that? Fab. Next, a quick look at the Imports-Exports General Enquiries page. The Goods Vehicle Movement Service, GVMS. Tidying up. So, Brexit. That happened. And in the UK, CTC has survived. Inventory-linked systems have survived. Pre-lodgements and temporary storage have survived, plus most other EU and international concepts of trade too. And regulations, covering these items and more, have been copied from the EU rule books, where appropriate, and harmonized, or tweaked and pasted into UK legislation, regulations, guidance, etc. But we now also have the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, or GVMS. Hurrah! This is a brand new system from HMRC. An evolution of similar EU systems, so worth spending a few minutes. The Goods Vehicle Movement Service, GVMS, is predicated on the pre-lodgement model, and provides quick access to documents pertinent to a specific goods movement. We'll get a better idea how shortly. Search for page 8. As a heads up. In 2020, the UK is adopting a phased approach to implementing its border post-transition. And we take a look at this phased approach in the last video of this mini-series. For now, scroll down to straddle this and the next page. We see GVMS is affected by the phased approach to UK border control. From January 2021 to the end of June 2021, GVMS will only be available for UK imports arriving from the EU and travelling under transit procedures, such as CTC, Common Transit. After this period, GVMS will be expanded to cater for all goods movements, but only at locations that have chosen to use it. So, let's focus on these transit-based imports. Jumping over to Goods Vehicle Movement Service, End-to-End Guide. And we see an example list of pre-lodgements down here. Although incomplete, we can see one of the things that GVMS deals with is transit movements. And we see transit references such as the CTC Transit Accompanying Document, or TAD. On top of that, we see declarations, even multiple declaration references and more. The trader's EOI, if they are using simplified procedures such as EIDR. Other transit stuff, different to CTC. And any of these items, plus many more not shown here, may be required and generated by any particular goods journey, in this case, starting in the EU and heading for the UK. So, for example, from January 2021, commonly, hauliers, sometimes even traders using the CTC, can use GVMS to collate ID numbers and references for these items into a record, called a Goods Movement Record, or GMR. The GVMS system issues the GMR with a unique code, referred to as the GMR ID. And the GMR ID may be printed off as a barcode and handed over to the driver, accompanying the goods movement. In this way, one might think of the GMR ID as part of a specialized one-way travel ticket to the UK. Why? In our example, let's say our trader applies for a CTC movement and employs an EU haulier to bring the goods into the UK. The haulier may then use GVMS to generate a GMR ID and print that as a barcode to be given to their driver. The haulier's driver need only to present that one item, the GMR ID barcode at the frontier, to any port authorities wanting to check the paperwork and goods. The barcode is presented to the carrier in order to allow the HGV to board a vessel bound for the UK. But it's worth noting that the TAD and MRN play a key role. To find out more, jumping back to the border model. Page 20. And we see Transit and the Goods Vehicle Movement Service, GVMS. The MRN is generated by centralized customs platforms called Chief and CDS. And the MRN is used to identify declarations, as well as to group related documentation. The MRN is also given on the Transit Accompanying Document, or TAD. As the TAD travels with the goods, then, for imports into the UK, it is the MRN on the TAD that, if available, needs to be copied over into the GMR record in order to tie UK imports to declarations and related records stored in Chief or CDS. And as a reminder, the TAD is a paper document generated by transit systems at the Office of Departure or by the authorized consignor using NCTS. The TAD signifies that all the relevant checks have been met for a particular consignment. And an MRN is given on the TAD, which is printed out and travels with the associated goods as proof of having passed customs checks and of CTC transit facilitations. The TAD is presented to customs as and when necessary. And to reiterate, the TAD MRN needs to be copied over into the GMR record. Okay, great. Are there any other haulier responsibilities? Basically, hauliers need to check all the paperwork is included and linked in the GMR record, and that the driver is carrying all necessary documents and knows what to do to reach the destination. Let's jump down to Importing Stage 3. Scroll down a bit more and bottom right. For imports into the UK. When using GVMS to link items into a GMR record, hauliers should check that either the TAD MRN is included, otherwise, if the trader is using simplified procedures, such as entry in the declarant's record, then the trader's EOI number needs to be included instead. And let's not forget, from January 2021, this must be a GB EOI number. Scrolling down a bit, we see that any safety and security declaration references need to be included for each trailer. And we see Two methods to do this, given here. Either via an API link, or via the GVMS app in their UK Government Gateway account. And we'll touch on this again shortly. On top of this, standard haulier stuff. All the vehicle registration numbers, including trailer numbers, also need to be entered into the GVMS system. And even if these numbers change, en route, they must be correct in GVMS, by the time the GMR is presented to the carrier, at the point of departure. What about giving instructions to drivers? Indeed, the hauliers must instruct drivers that they are not to proceed to the border, until they have a complete and correct GMR record. On top of that, as procedures may vary from port to port, hauliers must not only ensure that their drivers are carrying all the necessary paperwork, but that their drivers know their responsibilities, at the checkpoints, and how to execute them. For example, before crossing the English Channel, drivers should know how to pass on their GMR codes, both to the port authority, and to the carrier, in control of the ferry they are using. So, EU hauliers bringing goods into the UK may want to register for GVMS. Okay. So how does anyone get access to GVMS? Just to the right, and under, using GVMS as an EU company. Part of the registration process involves getting a GBEOI. You need to get a GBEOI, and I guess just about anyone from anywhere can try to apply for one of these. EU hauliers too. And we have an old video you might like, that covers getting an EOI. And after the EOI stage, hauliers can then complete their GVMS registration. And that's nice. Once registered, hauliers can access GVMS in two ways. Either as an online service on gov.uk. Hauliers simply log on, using their own government gateway account, with this option. Or by connecting to GVMS, from their own business systems, using some sort of GVMS data connection interface, called the GVMS API. Authorization may be needed from HMRC. And we can find details about the GVMS API, back in the Goods Vehicle Movement Service End-to-End Guide. Quick look. Jumping back. We see the API documentation over here. And support available from the top right corner of this page. And don't forget, if you have any related questions, we'll show the HMRC Imports Exports General Enquiries page later too. Okay, not to dwell. Back to the border model. And what about the port operator? Scrolling up a bit. It is the port's responsibility to take reasonable steps, highlighted here. Do pause if you like. Also, get the latest from gov.uk. But, in short, responsibilities can vary according to the space available at the port, to hold goods, HGVs etc. Simply put, ports need to work with HMRC and instruct carriers, using the port, to capture and check GMRs, prior to boarding, and to send control instruction to HGV drivers, as to whether to board, or whether to proceed to a checkpoint. This entails scanning the vehicle registration and capturing trailer registrations too. If the authorized checkpoint is under the control of the port, then any goods held should not be released, until HMRC clears them for customs. And if checkpoints become full, drivers should be redirected to other checkpoints. And GVMS would need to work side by side with existing systems used at ports. As the port operators play a vital role, my guess is that HMRC would need to assure that the systems, set in place, meet performance requirements. And what are HMRC looking for? These systems need to be capable of ensuring that all goods, board with the appropriate GMR records, including TADs, declarations and associated documents, driver and vehicle documents etc. On top of this, goods movements must be linked to declarations well enough, such that drivers, hauliers and traders can be notified with accurate control messaging, even before goods arrive at a port. These systems should also be capable of notifying the traders, or their representatives, of the results of any documentary and physical checks. And although different control systems may be used at ports, GVMS should integrate and allow all this to be done in fast, almost real-time speeds, vital for ports, drivers and traders to react as promptly as possible, all the while allowing seamless customs clearance at the border, for valid goods movements. What about the carrier? What are the carrier responsibilities? Scrolling down. And carriers need to check boarding vehicle and trailer registration numbers. They need to tie these registration numbers to the GMR. And they need to ensure all boarding vehicles have a valid GMR, whilst refusing passage to vehicles that don't meet this, or other boarding criteria. After all this, and as the carrier readies to leave for the UK, the carrier must pass all the collected GMRID codes back to the GVMS system, in order to enable the related customs and transit declarations to be processed. The HMRC systems will timestamp and perform any risk assessments and duty and tax calculations, as applicable, for each GMR before contacting the driver, with control messages, to let them know whether they are cleared to proceed to their UK destination, or whether they need to divert to a UK checkpoint. And that's nice. Now we can see how ports, carriers and hauliers, using GVMS, can help to make cross-channel imports to the UK a more seamless affair. Fab. But before moving on, and because it might help, let's quickly point out a few tips when hauling goods back to the UK from the EU. Annex A. Search for page 105. We see. If an EU exporter uses a road haulier, in this case, to drive goods to the UK from the EU, then the driver or the haulier company should, out of diligence, contact the EU exporter if there is no safety and security data included in the export declaration. And this needs to be done in order to confirm that a separate exit summary declaration has indeed been lodged at the member state port being used to ferry the HGV across to the UK. And that's fine because the HGV might very well not be allowed on the ferry without it. If traveling via transit, the driver will need the NCTS transit accompanying document and MRN number. But we also see an interesting point related to the export accompanying document. The EAD also has an MRN number, and it may or may not contain safety and security data too. However, a caveat down here. Beware. We see, for goods below a certain value, an export accompanying document or EAD is not typically required by regulations. But for low-value goods, it might be better to have one than not, as it might still be needed for seamless entry to some ferry terminals, and may lead to more problems if missing. We see mention of missing EAD forms causing problems at automated ports. RoRo ports, I guess. In addition, we see the haulier should have the original /wet signed copies of any certificates or licenses required for the goods being imported to GB, for example, an original export health certificate, where one is required. Speaking of which, we introduce SPS in a later video in this 2020 approach to the 2021 UK border video miniseries. So, we touched on how GVMS works for transit movements heading for the UK. Also, we touched on what hauliers need to do to apply for GVMS. So, hopefully, we might now understand some of the basics of how hauliers and their drivers might use the new Goods Vehicle Movement Service, or GVMS. But under the bonnet, GVMS is designed to better integrate into the other customs systems, making it fast and slick when used at ports. Next, when exporting goods to the EU, we'll say a little about the steps taken by UK government to keep disruptions to a minimum when hauling goods from UK premises to the ports, Dover, Folkestone, etc. Search for page 14. Preparing to haul exports out of the UK. And we're on haulier readiness information and advice sites. And that's page 14 up here. Pause to read as you like. But first, what is the difference between customs controls and trade agreements? Okay. Quick jump to 77. In brief, and speaking very generally, the scope of a trade agreement is limited to the parties of the agreement. Inside a trade agreement, it lists, or sets out, the tariffs, the duties, the customs charges, etc., for all imports, exports of goods and sometimes even services. Usually, but not always, most of the duties will be set at 0% of the value of goods in a trade agreement. In other words, no duties will be charged for the specified items. Often, trade agreements also specify terms to ensure some sort of fair and level playing field between the parties, whilst also setting out the means of arbitration and complaint procedures that should be followed to resolve issues related to unfair practices between the parties who have signed the agreement. If the parties involved in a trade agreement operate on coastal waters, there may be fisheries and other related issues also included in the trade agreement. Also included are the standards to which various product types must conform. On the other hand, and separate from trade agreements, are the customs controls. These are largely the means, or the tools, by which everything in a trade agreement is enforced at the customs border. That includes the tariffs, duties, charges, standards, etc. In this way, amendments to trade agreements directly affect what happens at the customs border. If there is no trade agreement, then these controls implement the charges, duties and tariffs etc. as set out in World Trade Organization tariffs. The different ways customs controls operate are set out in customs rule books, such as the UCC. In the absence of such a rule book, then World Trade Organization conventions and rules can be used instead. The combination of WTO conventions and tariffs are commonly referred to as WTO rules. Both the WTO rules and the UCC rule book are enlightened by decades of experience. And we introduced the UCC in an earlier video. But more than that. As already mentioned, trade agreements protect against unfair practices between the parties and signatories concerned. On the other hand, customs controls, as well as implementing tariffs found in trade agreements or, failing that, WTO rules, customs controls are designed to protect domestic economies, businesses, and populations from crime and illegal practices originating from anywhere in the world. Illegal practices, such as smuggling, terrorism etc. So, bearing all this in mind, will customs declarations be necessary for UK exports if the UK signs a trade agreement with the European Union? Yes. Why is that? Whilst the UK was part of the EU, it followed EU membership rules. And these membership rules are designed to protect trade and the businesses and populations within the EU. As such, EU member state countries, following the EU membership rules, do not have to submit customs declarations when moving goods to and from other member states. But where a country has not signed up to EU membership, or where EU membership has ceased, then the EU implements customs border controls with those countries to protect the internal economies and populations of the European Union. As a result of these customs border controls, goods moving to the EU from the UK face customs declarations and safety and security measures etc. And generally, with regard to imports and exports, any emerging trade agreements, as well as any future amendments to those trade agreements, only tends to affect the level of duties and charges, or the conditions of those duties and charges. Without EU membership, customs declaration and associated paperwork remains compulsory. If you like, it's a bit old now, but I have a simple video called, What is a Customs Declaration? Okay, yes. But perhaps save that for later. For now, let's move on. So, how do all these EU customs controls affect hauliers and HGV drivers moving goods out of the UK? Okay, good question. Page 137. From January 2021. And specifically, for the UK. The fear is that the new customs processes, implemented by the EU after the transition period, could take goods vehicle drivers and hauliers by surprise, resulting in many ill-prepared HGV drivers, thus causing delays at ports, resulting in HGV trailbacks. Such traffic congestion can even disrupt some areas of inland traffic. In this way, both trade and traffic are affected. Page 14. From around mid-2020, and in an effort to minimize this risk, the UK government embarked on a survey, culminating in a program of direct outreach and engagement with hauliers and haulage managers. And as part of this outreach, from the 2nd of November 2020 to March 2021, we see 45 plus haulier advice sites installed at motorway service stations and truck stops across the UK, initially providing information on new processes, such as the check an HGV is ready to cross the border service, and the Kent Access Permit. From January 2020, these information and advice sites will also be delivering advisory border readiness checks and other support to help hauliers who are unclear about the steps to take before they proceed to their ports. Can anyone else complete these apps on behalf of the driver? Yes. Page 77. As well as using the information and advice sites mentioned previously, drivers could also ask colleagues at their haulage firm, or even the trader, to enter the details requested by the web service on their behalf. But take note. It is imperative that if someone is using the service on behalf of the driver, that they keep the driver updated with the app status results prior to the goods journey starting, because drivers starting a journey without the correct documentation and approval take a high risk of being stopped en route by the law. Okay. So how difficult will it be to get these apps, use these apps, and to get a Kent Access Permit? More good news. As well as being designed to help hauliers and their drivers understand if they are carrying the right documentation. These apps are freely available and require only minimal input. Okay. Let's dive straight in and explore the gov.uk information on these apps. So, to start with, HMRC have provided two systems here. The Check an HGV is ready to cross the border service, and the Kent Access Permit service. We'll list the similarities of both these systems first, and then we'll try and find the differences between these two apps. Okay, great. To start, for both apps, you will need paperwork to cross the border, even if the HGV is not carrying goods or if it is only carrying post. Added to this, a warning. HGV drivers will be fined £300 for making false declarations at any UK port. So, do use these services as appropriate to ensure you are carrying all the documents required at the ports. But also, both apps are multi-language online facilities for HGV drivers, and both provide help in different languages of the European Union. Both services can be used to check if you have the paperwork needed to cross the border between Great Britain and the EU in a heavy goods vehicle, HGV. And using either service, you will find out whether or not your HGV is ready to cross the border. And if your HGV is not ready, you will be given instructions on how to get the paperwork you need. And that's great. However, when using either system, you need to confirm which documents you already have. For example, and for both systems, we might imagine you may already have an EU import document with a barcode, for example from an import declaration or from a transit accompanying document perhaps. At other times, you may have an admission temporaire /temporary admission, ATA, or Transport International Routier, TIR, CONAIS. And we discuss these in future videos. And even if you do not need any of these particular documents, or if you're planning to collect them while traveling to the border, using either of these services will double-check and verify your requirements. Importantly, you will find out if you are missing any documents, certificates, permits, etc. The Kent Access Permit service provides a Kent Access Permit on successful application, but other than that, neither the Kent Access Permit service, nor the Check an HGV is ready to cross the border service, provides HGV drivers with any customs paperwork. But drivers can learn and understand more about the documents they need. From either page, simply click this link just here. And you can learn more about operator licenses and permits, eligibility to drive abroad, rules for transporting different types of goods, export documents and vehicle documents carried by the driver, as well as travel advice and country-by-country road rules for the EU. But more paperwork still is often required. At other times, drivers may need to carry extra paperwork when carrying specialty, restricted, or controlled goods. Goods such as live animals, animal products, fish products, plants, or other specialty, restricted, or controlled goods. And you can learn more from this link. The good news is that we also introduce specialty animal and plant goods, as well as controlled goods in the oncoming videos of this mini-series. Hurrah! In both cases, if drivers are traveling to a customs office of departure before taking the goods to the EU, then drivers also need to get a local reference number from the shipper or consignor supplying the goods. I'm guessing that this relates to goods movements approved via the Common Transit Procedure, or CTC. And where the driver is carrying goods on behalf of multiple consignors, then we can imagine that the driver will need to get a local reference number from each shipper. Anyway, moving on. And, as we previously saw, early submission of an entry summary declaration is part of the pre-lodgement model. Thus, HGVs leaving the UK and carrying goods all the way to the EU by road, via Eurotunnel for example, are the active means of transport into the EU. As such, the hauliers or drivers may well be expected to submit an entry summary declaration to the Customs Office of first entry to the EU, prior to driving into the Eurotunnel. On the other hand, for HGV drivers catching a ferry over to the EU, then the ferry will submit the entry summary declaration instead. As an aside, a note on exit summary declarations. In all cases, hauliers or drivers must verify, prior to arrival at the port, that either the trader has provided exit summary data as part of a combined export declaration, or that the trader has submitted a separate exit summary declaration. Pre-departure data, such as this, should have been sent to UK Customs prior to the HGV arrival at the UK port. And especially, if leaving via ferry, it's a good idea to check the exit summary data in advance of arriving at the port, as the ferry may block passage if this data is missing. And we covered entry and exit summary declarations elsewhere. But what we see here is that entry summary declarations can be made using the Import Control System, ICS. Hurrah! But note, each country has their own version of the Import Control System. And that's nice. So, take care to choose the ICS specific to the country you are crossing into. But I've found a couple of links that might help. One for the UK. One for France. But also, let's not forget the HMRC Imports and Exports General Enquiries page. This may prove useful should you need more information on ICS systems of the EU. And that's great. But both apps have a link to a help request form, pointing to the gov.uk tax service. Use this form if you need help or more information on either of these services. That's great too. But why two apps? What is the difference between these apps? Okay, great. 4. The Check an HGV is ready to cross the border service. This particular app is for either drivers of HGVs that weigh less than 7.5 tons, or for drivers of HGVs that are of any weight, even heavier, but that are going to the EU via any UK port other than the Port of Dover or the Eurotunnel. If either of these points apply, then you can use this app. And as we've covered most of the points here, let's skip down to the Start Now button. We see it takes around 3 minutes to use the service. So, the Kent Access Permit Service, or the KAP Wizard, as I like to call it. How does the KAP Wizard differ from this app? Okay, let's look at that. So, to reiterate, we can also check whether an HGV is ready to cross the border by using the Kent Access Permit Service too. But what can we do here that we can't do in the previous app? Well, apply for a Kent Access Permit for a start. But you can only do this after you have all the required documents to hand. And conditions apply in order to use this app in the first instance though. And what conditions are these? Use the KAP Wizard if you are also crossing into the EU via the Port of Dover or Eurotunnel. And your HGV has to be over 7.5 tons. If one or both of these conditions do not apply, then you don't need a Kent Access Permit. To rephrase and repeat. If your HGV is under 7.5 tons, or if you are leaving from any port other than the Port of Dover or Eurotunnel, then you do not need a Kent Access Permit, KAP. And under these circumstances, simply use the previous page, the Check an HGV is ready to cross the border service, to check that your HGV has all the paperwork and is ready to cross the border. And that's great. Back. Moving on. An important point, so worth stressing. The process of applying for a KAP permit helps manage traffic by confirming drivers have the right documents for EU import controls. But also, we see, for vehicles over 7.5 tons, you will need a Kent Access Permit even if the HGV is not carrying goods, or if it is only carrying post to the EU. And that's nice. What else is different? Regarding the Kent Access Permits. Each permit is valid for 24 hours, but you will need a new permit each time the HGV leaves Great Britain. Next, we also see information relating to fines. When traveling to the Port of Dover or Eurotunnel, drivers of HGVs over 7.5 tons could be stopped and fined up to £300 for entering Kent without having the requisite Kent Access Permit. And as a reminder, as mentioned, all HGV drivers, irrespective of vehicle size and weight, can similarly be fined for making false declarations at any UK port. So, use the service appropriate for your HGV to ensure you are carrying all the documents required at the ports. Who does not need a Kent Access Permit? As previously stated, you do not need a KAP if the HGV weighs 7.5 tons or less, or if you are not using the Port of Dover or the Eurotunnel in your journey. But what is additional here is that you do not need a KAP if you're just driving an HGV through or around Kent and not crossing the border. Or if you are dropping off a trailer that will then be taken across the border by other means. Under these circumstances, you do not need a KAP. And to reiterate, just to be sure, at all times, irrespective of KAP requirements, HGV drivers crossing the UK-EU border should still check that their HGV is ready to cross the border, even if they do not need a KAP. And we see what this service does not do. As already mentioned, the KAP service does not provide any customs or goods-specific paperwork, apart from a KAP. What else will you need to submit? As previously mentioned, an entry summary declaration, and a local reference number from the shipper or consignor, if traveling to a customs office of departure, before taking the goods to the EU. But on top of this, we see you definitely need the expected date and time of arrival of the HGV in Kent. And also, the registration number, front number plate, of the HGV. Scrolling down a bit, and we see the Start Now button. It takes around 5 minutes. To get your permit, you will have to confirm you have the correct customs and export documents before the HGV hits the road, and self-certify. In other words, complete a self-assessment to confirm you meet EU import requirements. But if I remember correctly, and as a double check, jumping back to the border operating model, page 137. Ah yes. And we see you have to self-certify in the other app too. The Check an HGV is ready to cross the border service. And that's nice. Okay. Page 77. Highlight that as our message. And back. What happens next? After completing this wizard. Then, if the HGV is not ready to cross the border, you will be given instructions on how to get the paperwork you need. But regarding KAP applications, if you have the correct paperwork, a KAP will be emailed to you. Haulier companies, or anyone acting on behalf of a driver, must share the permit with the HGV driver, as both an email and a printed copy. And a reminder down here. The permit is only valid for the 24-hour period stated on the permit. The driver must enter Kent and cross the border in this period. If the driver is going to arrive at the border before or after this 24-hour period, then submit a new application covering the correct period. And that's nice. But how will the police know if an HGV needs to be stopped? I can only guess that. As the app is set up for goods vehicles such as HGV transports, it may also be connected to the automatic number plate recognition, ANPR, camera technology, used in motorway cameras. This technology records vehicle number plates, as well as average speed of vehicles etc. And the app may well be connected to ANPR, tested and ready to use by the 1st of January 2021. And all this information can also be connected to the transit information in HMRC systems. In this way, if drivers have a red light but still go to Dover, they can be stopped, fined, and turned around. Will both apps work and what are the countermeasures? Yes, it will work. This service has been tested and is ready for widespread use from the end of the transition period. Regarding reasonable worst-case overflow countermeasures, the Department for Transport, in conjunction with Kent Resilience Forum, are working to provide sufficient infrastructure to hold and keep ill-prepared HGVs away from UK ports and out of traffic, even in the event of their reasonable worst-case scenario taking effect, so as to prevent road closures and keep ordinary road traffic flowing. More details are included in the UK Border Model PDF and on the gov.uk website. And that's nice. More importantly, to help avoid traffic disruption, road closures etc., traders and hauliers should also ensure that they have made all necessary preparations to do business after the end of the transition. And so, specifically targeting hauliers and their drivers. It is anticipated that the information and advice sites, as well as the Check an HGV is Ready to Cross the Border app, and Kent Access Permit, plus spot fines, will minimize risk of traffic chaos caused by HGVs building up on roads and causing disruptions, especially on motorways, dual carriageways, and roads approaching UK ports on GBEU routes, as forewarned in the UK government's reasonable worst-case scenario. And so, we have looked at GVMS and the pre-lodgement model. In so doing, we touched on how the UK government are working with traders, hauliers, carriers and port authorities to prepare for the end of the 2020 transition period. We saw how the sister app to GVMS, i.e. the Check an HGV is Ready to Cross the Border service, the Kent Access Permit, and the supporting teams at the information and advice sites at UK truck stops and motorway service stations, will help hauliers and drivers to carry the appropriate documentation, whilst alerting the authorities to pending and approved HGV movements. And hopefully, by now, we can see, as long as all the actors play their part, how cross-channel goods movements may indeed be enabled to flow smoothly after the end of the transition period. And that's pretty cool. And there's more information on this page and throughout. UK exporters exporting goods to the EU must continue to follow any existing rules required by EU customs authorities. So very quickly, pointing to more information on rules related to exporting. And traders can get more information from Section 4 in this border document. Could be a useful reference for hauliers too. But hauliers can also look up Annex B, page 110. EU import requirements. Getting prepared. Quickly skimming through this. But do pause where you like. We see question and answer pages down here. Relating to EOI. GB traders and GB hauliers may require EU economic operators registration and identification, EOI, numbers when dealing with customs authorities of the EU. Also over here. UK hauliers. I am a UK haulier. What requirements do I need to meet to transport goods via RoRo into the EU? And over here. GB exporters and their representatives. I am a GB exporter. What do I need to know about the steps the EU importer needs to take? Scrolling down. Step 8 of this, over here. The EU importer, or their agent, has contacted the GB exporter or agent to say that the goods have been selected for a control at the border. What does this mean? Member states will operate verification and release regimes. Some controls are mandated by European legislation. Arrangements and operating procedures for verification and release regimes may differ from member state to member state. The detail follows in the next section. Over here. Border formalities at specific EU ports /terminals. Scrolling down. We see details of border formalities, followed by verification and release regimes. Details of formalities of port systems for France, Netherlands, Belgium, Spain, Ireland. And that's great. But I want to quickly point something out. Traces. What is traces? Scrolling up. We see TRACES is the European Commission's multilingual online platform for sanitary and phytosanitary certification required for the importation of animals, animal products, food and feed of non-animal origin and plants into the European Union, and the intra-EU trade and EU exports of animals and certain animal products. Its main objective is to streamline the certification process. Why are we looking at this? Because in our next video, we introduce sites and goods subject to sanitary and phytosanitary controls. What's that? I don't know. But we explore this and more in the next video. Fab. For now. Ending on the HMRC Imports Exports General Enquiries page.